there's a Sims in our neighborhood, or not neighborhood, in our membership, who's two M's, and it's like this big family that's like this big builder family, big construction family. And so every time I introduce myself as Andrew Sims, they're like, "Oh, are you related to Charlie?" And I'm just like, first I was like, "No, that's two M's versus one M," but now I'm just like, "Oh yeah, it's just an uncle, you know." Yeah, it's no big deal.
Well, Andrew Sims is with me. He's the CEO from the Dayton board of Realtors. And Andrew, it's great to catch up with you, man. Thanks for taking the time here.
Oh, anything for you, my friend. And actually, I should tell you, we at the end of last year, we actually became just Dayton Realtors.
Oh, nice.
We are no longer, we're the artists formerly known as DABR, and now we're one of many that are just Dayton Realtors. So that was a fun little thing to get accomplished.
Yeah, that's cool. It's a great shift. A lot of folks are going that direction because the board of realtors is confusing, and then there's the association piece that seems so removed from like being a part of the community. So I like the idea of just being Dayton Realtors.
Well, and it's funny, you know, when I came up here, of course, my background was working at the Birmingham Association of Realtors, which carried with it, I guess, more of a name recognition, because association sounds a lot different than board. And so when you were talking to people and telling people you were with the Dayton area board of realtors, it was kind of like, well, is that like 10 people? And it's like, well, no, we have about 3,000 people. So association was always kind of a better word. And so when I would introduce myself, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm with the Realtor Trade Association. So they weren't just like, oh, it's just you and 10 people hanging out every month. So, which it really kind of is at times, but
that's a whole different story, right?
Yeah.
So before we start talking some association stuff here, one of my favorite feeds on your Facebook page recently was this whole concept of listening in on someone's date next to you. You had a recent experience where you got quite a third party person's point of view on a first date.
Well, you know, it started out that I don't know how my wife and I always manage to the nights that we choose to go on a date night. It's also, I guess I could say, unfortunately, someone else's date night. And we always manage to get seated next to these things. And of course, my attention deficit kicks in, and I immediately become enthralled in these two individuals' lives. And, you know, what better way to share someone else's misery than on Facebook? So I usually end up spending my time there live blogging this date that's happening. And my wife's just kind of sitting there rolling her eyes at me. And I'm like, Christina, the people deserve to know. They need to know what's happening. This is not fake news. So
I bet from your account of that date, I think she wished it was fake news.
It just never amazes me. And honestly, I left that restaurant saying to my wife, I was like, you know what, you better like never leave me, because like I don't want to be that person that's like, you know, trying to be on a first date and there's somebody like overhearing it and, you know, my awkward jokes or something, and they're just like, oh my gosh, this guy, he's so sad. It's just so horrible. But it's fun, and you know, it's content, as we say in the marketing world. So some people appreciate it, some people don't. But I guess that's what unfollow is for. So.
Well, let's start with the whole idea of communications. That's something that you specialized in. It's kind of your entry into the whole association world. Could you talk a little bit about like your background in communications and some of your thoughts on the importance of communications in the association world?
Yeah, so really quick, just to kind of start off, my degree was from Auburn University down in Alabama, and my degree was in communications, but my focus was on journalism. I actually wanted to be a writer. I at one point had this very lofty, probably naive viewpoint that I was going to like be writing for the Rolling Stone and covering, you know, wars overseas and writing books and all this kind of stuff. And then I realized that nobody actually pays anybody to do that anymore. And so you had to like get a real job. And so I stayed within journalism, but what I realized was that the communication world was so rapidly changing that traditional journalism, traditional writing wasn't going to be where I wanted to set myself as a millennial coming out into the busy job market. So I quickly taught myself web development and programming and graphic design. and basically, without really knowing, turned myself into, I guess, what you refer to as a full stack marketer, in the sense that while I got content creation, I also was basically a one-man shop, producing video, producing web graphics, stuff like that. So my first job out of college was with Raycom Media down in Montgomery. We ran about 30 different local news channel websites, and I basically was creating interactive content for all those websites, and just really didn't want to do news anymore, and got into advertising when I moved back to Birmingham, and jumped around to a couple shops, did some other things, and then, like most millennials, I figured I could do it better myself. So I opened up my own agency and started consulting and doing client work, which, you know, it was very nice, very fun. I worked harder than I ever have in my life. And what stumbled down the road was that the association in Birmingham was looking for a communications person. So I just, you know, I didn't know anything about real estate or the Realtor Association, but I had a friend that worked in the MLS, and he was like, hey, why don't you just come in? And of course, that's where I met the illustrious Cliff Long, and interviewed with him to come on as a kind of a contractor. And, you know, he basically kind of tricked me into joining the association. He brought me in as kind of a contract worker. And then he was like, well, why don't you come to staff meeting? And I was like, come to staff meeting? You know, I'm a vendor meetings. Well, so I went anyway, and I went to the staff meeting. And at that staff meeting, he announced to that whole team in Birmingham that he was going to hire a communications director. And I was like, well, you know, if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be me. I'm not going to work for anybody else. So I just went to Cliff and I was like, you know, I'll throw my hat into the ring for that job. And he was like, okay, well, it's yours. So, you know, honestly, my foray into the association world was really kind of random and without much planning. But honestly, it's given me my best friends in life. It's given me my career, and I love every day that I get to do it. But your second question was kind of the importance of communication. And when I came into that role, I realized that there was a lot of areas that a trade association should be hitting in terms of metrics about member communications, consumer communications, and, you know, communications with other members of the public, elected officials, economic development, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, there had never been anybody in my position that was measuring those metrics and putting strategy, actual strategy into place on how we were going to reach members and then measure that communication to see what results we were getting. So when I came in, you know, of course, I met a bunch of other communications directors, all of whom, you know, my best friends. But it was very quick that, you know, I was going to be able to plug in and be a leader and kind of help people with these kind of new world strategies that I had learned in advertising and journalism and media, and kind of apply them to an industry where communications directors come from all different walks of life. I mean, you've got some that are hardcore PR people. They're not digital. They're traditional PR people. You've got people who've had backgrounds in news, people who, like my communication director here in Dayton, has a background in TV production. And so there's just so many walks of life that I think communications directors specifically come from, whereas government affairs directors generally tend to come from one angle, or education directors tend to come from one angle. But communications directors are such a swath of communications careers that people could come from. So, you know, I immediately plugged in, and I think it was New Orleans that, like, I raised my hand and I was like, oh, I'll be the vice chair of this group. And everybody was like, yeah, sure. But I think it was mostly because nobody else was running against me. So they were just like, well, we have to choose this guy. But, you know, I'm grateful that they did. But, you know, I think the association still has, I guess, lengths to go, I think, in reaching its membership. And communications in the next couple of years, as the association continues to change, is going to continually evolve. It's going to continually need younger people, you know, that know these new ideas, new social. I mean, when I started in here, Snapchat wasn't a thing, but now Snapchat is employed as a marketing tool for associations. You know, Instagram was just kind of coming out, being a thing. You know, we messed around with Vine for a little while. If you remember Vine, it got bought by Twitter and promptly killed by Twitter. You know, so there was just a lot of things that have kind of come up. I mean, you know, Facebook Live was not a thing when I started. And now that's a huge part of people's communication strategies. So it's continually evolving. It's the most continually evolving I think, facet of association life. So that was a very long answer. So I hope I covered what you're asking.
No, it's good stuff. One of the things, as I'm traveling around the country and working with folks on a strategic planning level, I do some pre-work assessment, and I ask the question, what's the association struggling with the most? And always and forever, the idea of communications and engagement come up. So
constantly.
That idea of really being strategic about your communications is something that everybody talks about, but not necessarily are capable of doing.
Yeah, I mean, it goes down to things that are as simple as when we went through our website redesign here in Dayton, which was one of the first major products or projects that I worked on here. It was just shocking to me that we did not employ Google Analytics. That's something that's so simple that so many associations either don't know to do that, or worse, they are kind of held hostage by a vendor that doesn't make that possible for them to be engaged in Google Analytics research. Because at the end of the day, it's, if you were running your own business, if you were running a company of some kind, you would want to know how many people were hitting your website. You would want to know what content's hitting, what content's sticking, where guests are coming from, what search terms are are working and what are not. And it's just amazing that you would have people that are essentially shooting in the dark for years and years. That don't know that, So when we linked up Google Analytics this last year, when we launched our website in December, when we took a look at everything, we were over 1.5 million views to our website, and we actually deployed a property search functionality to our website, which generated like 6,000 different individual unique property searches of our members' properties, which is fantastic, but. Without data and analytics, there would have been no way to know that. So it's things that are as simple as that, that I think, but I think to your point, people are talking about, when people talk about communications being a problem, the average everyday member doesn't care about Google Analytics. What they care about is whether newsletters are hitting inboxes, whether newsletters are getting opened, how frequently you're sending newsletters. I mean, that's the topics of conversation that are on Facebook. The Com Directors group in Facebook, it's, how many times do you send a newsletter? Do you use MailChimp? Do you use Emma? Do you use Constant Contact? Those are the conversations. And it's like, we've got to get past that point as an industry, where we're not worrying about the tools. Instead, we're worrying about the strategy behind it. The tool is just a tool. But if the strategy is not there and it's not accepted, that's the biggest thing, is that your members and your leaders accept that strategy. Our strategy is that we are weekly on the website, we are daily on social media, and we're bi-weekly in the newsletter. Period, set in stone. That's the overall overarching 30,000-foot strategy. And then everything else kind of funnels in under that in terms of what's going out to people.
So really starting with the concept of having a planning calendar and sticking to that calendar, do you think that's one of the most basic elements of employing a communication strategy?
Oh, it is. It is the absolute base of, if you're building a house, Clint, you're going to set that concrete slab first, or you're going to dig that basement first, because that whole layout of that house is going to get dictated about what room goes where the kitchen goes, where the plumbing goes, all that kind of stuff. So if you don't have a single spreadsheet that says, hey, this is the month of February, on this day, we're posting this, and it has to be a whole staff commitment as well. One of the things that I'm going to be talking about at AEI actually is about personal communication as a CEO, your personal communication, but then additionally, how to get your staff to buy in, because once an AE, once a CEO commits that they're going to be a public-facing social CEO, it all kind of then snowballs into this, okay, well, now everybody needs to be a social and communicative staff member as well. So everybody's got to have buy-in. It can't just be the comm director. It can't just be the AE and the comm director. My government affairs director knows that he's blogging once a month. I blog once a month. I'm fixing to turn my MLS team loose on blogging once a month, tech tips, teaching people about MLS products we have. It has to be a complete buy-in from the whole staff, because then and only then, I think, will you kind of move the ball along, where the members actually start seeing, hey, I can go to any of these people's places publicly and see what's going on.
For me, the other element of that, and especially starting at an organizational level when I come in and do strategic planning, is to identify the core service areas, and so that you can align your communications around those areas which deliver the greatest value to the most members. And so to me, that's an additional layer in terms of structure, and your strategy is starting to identify, okay, what are those key areas that matter most to members, and then how do we communicate in a way that's structured around that, and
Right.
not even just communicate, but also brand around those core service areas. And that's something I always really push hard when I'm doing strategic planning, because you can't communicate your message and your value if you're trying to be everything to everyone at all
Yeah.
times.
No, you can't. And you're exactly right. It always goes back to core services. When people are sitting around wondering what they need to be working on, it's always back to core services and what the absolute mission of the association is. And you're exactly right. Core services dictates communication. And again, we separate that from the practical nature of it. We set that away from the tools and the strategies to achieve that. But you've got to be unified around that, and that's why it's so great what you're doing with the strategic planning. Is because I know from just knowing you, Clint, that you're the type of guy that likes things in order. And you like knowing that if there's 1 or 5 objectives that we're here to hit, that's what we're going to do. And once those things are set, you can say, okay, how do we talk about education? Because at the end of the day, I'm a digital guy. I digest everything online, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, email, YouTube videos, whatever. That's how I digest. But I also have to realize that my demographic doesn't necessarily dictate that as well. The average age of my realtor here in Dayton is 55 plus. Okay, well, those people aren't sitting on Facebook every day. Those people aren't sitting inside of groups. They aren't sitting inside of, notifications and stuff all day. So, one of the things that we changed was when I first got here, we did a digest of our education for like the upcoming months, and we would print that out and hand it out to people at classes and at orientations. Well, when I first got here, being the young go-hard that I am, I was like, oh, we need to go paperless. We need to get rid of this. We just need to put everything online and put it out online. Well, I'm telling you, man, not even a week after I stopped printing that that education digest, there was a knock at my door, someone saying, well, where's that education digest? I don't know what's going on anymore. I'm like, well, you know what? It's on the website. Well, I don't go to the website. And, I just kind of like fought back tears. I was like, but it's such a beautiful website. But so we started printing them again. And, we hand them to our directors. We hand them to our members. Flyers still work, man, putting flyers out for people. So, it's the startup mentality. Before I got into all this stuff, I worked for a couple of startups, and, I studied the whole lean startup model. There's actually a book called The Lean Startup. And, what it talks about in, I guess, less than in a short version is, launch quick, fail quick. And that's something that associations don't do well. It's hard to get the mentality of 100-year-old organization to start talking about launching quick and failing quick, because 100-year-old organizations don't do things quickly. They do things that are turning an aircraft carrier. And so it's kind of bringing some of these startup marketing principles into the association and saying, look, we've never done this kind of we've never done this Instagram campaign. We've never gotten out into Facebook ads and buying ads on Facebook. So let's try it. Let's see if it works. And, if it doesn't work, then, hey, we're only out $20, $30, $50. And if it does work, then heck, we found a new avenue with which to market with. So, but it's a mentality, it's a culture. And, you've got to have somebody in here that says, look, I'm willing to test some things and fail on them. Like, for example, we launched a YouTube series this last year called Open House. And it was a YouTube series where my government affairs director was interviewing, RPAC and, government affairs leaders, realtor leaders at the state and local level. But then we also started interviewing some elected officials. And so we launched it out, and I mean, it looks great. It was awesome. We made a really sexy logo for it, and it just looked really, really good. And we started marketing it and putting out, and honestly, the views aren't there. And I hate it because it was a really good idea that I had, but it was, the metrics do not equate to continuing. And so But that's what you have to be. You have to be unafraid and unapologetic to launch something, and then be cool when it doesn't work to kind of pivot and do something different. But that is not a natural state for an association. That's, that's just not how we usually typically run.
Yeah, you mentioned AEI. My presentation at AEI is going to focus on the idea of we've never done it that way, but ultimately what it's about is designing or moving towards, I should say, an innovation culture like you're alluding to. And it integrates the idea of design thinking, which is a tech industry approach, but more and more it's starting to be adopted by other outlets and other industries as a way to innovate. And one of the key elements of that is the idea of prototyping and failing quickly and failing forward, like you were talking about, and learning that type of a culture and integrating that into your process so that it can become a part of who you are, rather than just always, doing it the way that we've always done it. We actually look at new ways to innovate, and a lot of that is through failure. I mean, that's just the reality. If you look out into the world of innovation right now, and it doesn't even have to be macro innovations, it can be micro innovations, but they happen through failures most of the time.
Well, they do. I mean, look at what we're using right now to do this interview, Google Hangouts. When Google was started in somebody's garage, they didn't think they were going to be doing video teleconferencing. That wasn't an innovation that Google had when they walked out the door that day. When the guys said we're going to start Google, they wanted to start an archive of internet data that could be searchable. And now, we're using Google Hangout. You've probably got documents inside of Google Docs, but imagine how many iterations of that product went through testing, went through development, had user focus groups attached to it, and then was launched into a product that the company then, says, well, this is our gold standard for communication. It's that same, and I understand that people might say, okay, well, Andrew, you're comparing, Google, which is an innovative tech company, the largest in the world, to the Realtor Association. We already talked about it, the 4 pillars. We have these kind of core services we're supposed to be doing. But, this leads me into something that I hope we can touch on in this call, and that is the Association of Tomorrow. What does the Association of Tomorrow look like? We have MLSs that are constantly evolving, consolidations, regionalization. There's all these words being tossed around about what the MLS of tomorrow looks like. Everybody's talking about upstream, AMP, all these different words about what the MLS of tomorrow looks like. Okay, well, when do we also start talking about what the Association of Tomorrow looks like? And the Association of Tomorrow has to branch out and become fluent, in these words like innovation, like technology development. There's a couple things that I know I personally am wanting to bring to the forefront here in Dayton that is revolutionary in its thinking conceptually, but at the same time, it's kind of like no-brainer in its actual practicality. And so, but I think that's what we have to talk about as an industry is, what does tomorrow look like? If we've got boards that are, not hitting core standards or struggling to hit core standards, how are we as other boards helping them, assisting them, talking with them, having these communications about, okay, this is how we best serve our members. I think at some point you look back in time and wonder, if there had been a mentality of first to market. That's the big thing out in Silicon Valley. We want to be first to market, first to launch. Would we have been faced with the same landscape we are in terms of disruptors? Bob Goldberg talked about disruptors. That was the buzzword in Chicago this last year, I think. And what do we do now? What do we do now that there's these disruptors in the industry? And the argument is then we disrupt. And to disrupt, we have to first come up with something to disrupt with. But we would be surprised how many conversations aren't happening at the local level to say, hey, what? I had somebody come in the other day talking about, asking me what I thought about different CRMs. And, I'm sitting there, I'm saying, well, I'm not a realtor. I don't really know what you need in a CRM, but I've been in sales before and I know what I liked in a CRM. Well, when I was in sales work, I actually had a product I tried to launch that was a sales pipeline tool. I was going to develop it, package it up, and start selling it to people as a pipeline tool. It was right when Contactually had come out, and I had used Contactually, but I was like, this should be broken off into a couple of different other business theories. But even stuff like that, I digress. It's thinking like that, getting a group of people together that says, hey, what do we not like that's out in the field, and what can we come up with? I mean, there's other states that do this all the time, that come up with products that then become things. And I think that's something that NAR could grab into as well, and see what innovation comes from the local level, and products that come up with internally within our family. So, but I think that's where we need to go as an industry, is looking forward to not only what happens in the MLS, but also what happens to our association and how those core services can adapt and evolve.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And right now, with some of the work that I'm doing, I'm finding the most important work for me moving forward towards that idea of the association of the future is really to start with the concept of decoupling the MLS from the association. And that's not to say that you have to completely remove the relationship. I do think it needs to shift, and we've got to stop relying on MLS to define our entire value proposition
Yes.
as an association. Moreover, we have to start to restructure how we approach things, and we can't just be subsidizing the association activities with MLS revenue, and that's happening far too often around the country, and it's stifling both of those entities from becoming what they should be for tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree 100%. The days of the MLS subsidizing the association have got to come to an end. And just like you said, it doesn't mean that we walk out the door, and tear the papers in half and throw them into the wind and say, well, that was fun for, 20 years. What it means, though, is taking a look internally inside of your board operations, at your finances, and start looking at, okay, what if the MLS were to disappear tomorrow? Where would I take hits? What would my hits be financially? And then it's literally building a strategy to overcome those hits. It's literally saying, okay, if we were to regionalize, if we were to do something different, where would that evolution be? And what would the pros and cons, the losses, the strengths in that area be? That's why I think it's so important what, Kevin McQueen and those guys at T3 are doing, to kind of go and sit and talk with these people, because honestly, Clint, as well as I do, that what it comes down to is just having the conversation. But so many people are so scared to even have the conversation. It doesn't mean that you light the building on fire. It just means that you sit down and you talk about what you're doing, because right now we already have a strategy. I already have my staff and my leadership working on a strategy that, should something change down the line in terms of our MLS, are we prepared? And there's many associations that have been doing this for years. NAR told people years ago, break the chain, cut the cord, stop living off of the MLS. They told people that verbatim. They told people that. And we didn't, some people didn't listen. Of course, this is before my time. But now, there's people that are engaged in real estate development. There's people that are engaged in financial investing, but they're finding ways to offset that cost so that if something should change, they're able to better serve their members and not be held hostage. Held hostage is probably a strong word, but
I don't know that it is. I know our
well, if you think it's okay, you're the host, so you can say it.
I think the mentality, if you think in terms of having a captured audience, maybe that's a softer way of saying it, but this whole idea of the NAR fair share, membership dues clause is, I understand it, but at the same time, it becomes an excuse for so many associations when you couple that with the idea of the MLS and its prevalence in terms of the value in a day-to-day agent's life. We don't have to do anything else. They're compelled to join anyway. Right. We give them MLS services, and the rest of it is whatever. To me, so my former association, we were decoupled, almost 20 years ago. So I know on the other side of that it works just fine. And in fact, what it allows you to do in many instances to do exactly what you're saying is we finally get to truly focus on our value proposition outside of the MLS. And under those circumstances, then you begin to innovate and you look at defining your value, focusing in on those core tenets that are something that no one else has to offer. And primarily, my view is that comes through advocacy.
Well, it's kind of, I guess an analogy would be it's kind of like moving out of your parents' basement. You know,
Such
it's
a millennial analogy you're
I
using
know,
here.
I know. So, but it is. It's kind of like realizing, like, look, you know, I can either sit here and eat leftovers from the fridge upstairs, or I can apply myself and really kind of push myself out of the nest, and learn to fly in ways. There's tons of boards that are out there that are part of regional cooperatives, that are part of whole groups that still have strong, dedicated, robust membership. And you're exactly right, Clint. You know, the day that I can stop worrying about MLS fines and instead focus on working with economic development groups on bringing a billion-dollar company to our region, that would be a glorious, glorious day. But, you know, as it is, you know, we still have the MLS to manage, and that's fine. We do it. We take care of it. But you're exactly right. It can be a distraction. It can be a distraction from, like we said, building the association of tomorrow, in the off chance that something changes. Because you're exactly right. I see all the time on Facebook, NAR's Facebook group, which some days those conversations just get out of control. But you know, my heart goes out to Nobu on that, of having to regulate and, like, you know, sit there and monitor that. But you know, you see it all the time. You see constantly people saying, you know, well, we need to take back our MLS. We need to take back our data. We need to take back this. And so it almost puts the association, unintended, as an adversary, instead of being an ally, because they don't understand that the MLS and the association. Now, we're not talking about the 10 or 12% that we all have that are actively engaged in the board, volunteering on committees, serving on the board of directors, and coming and supporting events. I'm talking about the 90% of the membership that may not understand what's happening, in the association, and again sees the association as rule makers, as, you know, the police, and somehow their first and sometimes only interaction with the association is a fine from the MLS. You know, if we were a for-profit business, this would be terrible customer service. It'd be terrible. You know, if we were an airline that the only reason people talked to us was to just complain, then we wouldn't be an airline for very long. The public opinion would rule us out. But yet our business model sometimes forces us to be an adversary in places, and we have to focus whole months, whole times on reviewing policy, making sure a policy is right, and losing months on things like building the global alliance, building, you know, cultural awareness, working in advocacy, like you said, and it can be really depressing, because, you know, you have many ideas about how to advance things, but yet you're kind of trapped in this relationship that is oftentimes, like I've said before, adversarial. And, you know, it won't change in the sense that if it goes to a regional MLS, there'll already be somebody, you know, there'll be more problems there. I guess the point is it'll be somebody else's problems, not mine.
So tell me a little bit about this. You know, we talk a lot about consolidation, regionalization, alliances, all that in terms of the MLS, but I'm very intrigued by the concept of trying to build out true alliances amongst associations, so that there might be a way in which we could more directly work with each other on a day in and day out basis without sacrificing the local culture that seems to be such a disruptor, if we want to use that word, for local association mergers and consolidation. I think there's some models out there that are based on alliances and you know, collaboration and cooperation, similar in the way that we see MLS. But MLS is so simple because we just say it's around data. But you know, the association, when you boil it down, is around 3 or 4 different things, and each of us have different strong suits. And I would believe we'd be stronger together, rather than this idea of, well, we're competing against you, and with, you know, core standards being what it is, some folks use it to justify, to say, oh, we're performing just as well as our neighboring association, when in reality they're not. And so I don't know what your thoughts are on the association of the future and what different models are out there, but if you'd be willing to share, I'd be interested to hear.
Yeah, I think, it's definitely, I don't think it's as deep as an elephant in the room conversation, but at the same time, I do think it is a little bit of an elephant in the room, because on the one hand, you obviously, you don't want to get anybody out of a job. You don't want to cause anybody to not have a job. If there's another AE at another association, you don't want to be that person that.
Okay, but if that's the priority, is we're worrying about our colleagues and their jobs, and we're not worrying about the health and the long-term sustainability of the entity, the association itself, aren't we no longer fulfilling our fiduciary responsibilities?
You are spot on. I was giving the roundabout nice answer to though, but you're exactly right. So let me fast forward. So if you take all of that out and you stop looking at mergers as takeovers, mergers and consolidations, we have to stop thinking of them as takeovers, because we have a board to our north that, we share members, and they do their thing and we do our thing. We obviously, do things differently. We have different services that we provide and a different, I guess, probably customer experience that we provide, but it doesn't somehow negate what they're trying to do up there. But you're exactly right. It's like, look, let's cut out the talk of who takes who over. Let's stop the language where this sounds like a corporate buyout instead of the word alliance. Just like you've mentioned, where it says, look, you don't have the resources with which to conduct candidate screening. You don't have the resources with which to be actively engaged with your state senators and state reps. And I'm actively doing that work right now. So instead of you sitting there not fulfilling that, why can't we come to a business agreement, a business arrangement, where we're doing that in concert? And of course, then you get to the topic of shared services, which of course has been around. But I think it needs to go a step further, in the sense that it's like, look, we're stronger in numbers. And if all that's standing between you providing as a board, again, you said fiduciary duty, so let's use that word. If all that's standing between you fulfilling your fiduciary to your directors up there is this concept that somehow we're going to come in and like kick you out of your office and like make you wear our logo and all this kind of stuff. Okay, if that's the only mountain to overcome, like, let's just not even walk up the mountain. Let's go around. Let's take the path around that mountain and instead say, look, you're going to keep what you're doing. You're going to keep your autonomy and do all that. But at the same time, we're now going to help you provide these services that are better, that allow you to really, truly serve your members in the area of advocacy. Because I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of things that I'd love to get into up in that neck of the woods. That right now, frankly, might be crossing some lines. But at the same time, as a CEO myself, I'm also not going to stop what I'm doing to serve members and serve real estate and serve the real estate industry by, just stopping what I'm doing when I know that I can do some meaningful work. So, like you said, I think there's a culture amongst ourselves that we need to overcome. And I think once that culture is overcome, we'll be able to help our members understand that shared services and merger or consolidation doesn't mean takeover and loss of identity. But that's how many of people feel right now, is that they're somehow going to lose everything. I think a perfect example is our buddy who was on your show a little while ago, Kip Cooper. I think Kip has just done a fantastic job of talking about consolidation and fostering this mentality of shared, stronger together services in a way that I'm actually very envious of that environment. But at the same time, Kip would probably get on here and say, oh, it's not rocket science. It's just preparing that value proposition and having a conversation about it. But that's the thing, is a lot of times we can't even get to the table because so many times people see you coming up the road and they immediately put the gate up. And that's kind of what we've experienced down here. The gate just kind of keeps getting dresser drawers and beds packed up against it like they're preparing for an invasion, whereas it doesn't have to be like that. But again, I think the culture has to start with us from an AE perspective that, hey, this is what this means. And if that means core standards has to get tighter, then core standards needs to get tighter. But at the end of the day, the members aren't going to wait around for us to figure it out.
That's the issue, is that
they're going to make a decision.
The natural marketplace is already forming. So I feel your pain in my former entity. It's funny, in the last week I'm seeing I started a regional coalition, and it was really looked down upon by some of my neighboring boards, because it was like, oh, you're coming into our neck of the woods. And I'm saying, no, what's happening is the market is already in your neck of the woods. Yeah. And I'm not serving my members if I'm not thinking at a regional scale. I'm not trying to overstep you. I'm not trying to overtake you. But if you're unwilling to come and work on these issues with us, then I'm not going to stop, because you're isolating yourself, and you're propping the, like you were saying, to use your analogy, just because your chest of drawers is up against the fence doesn't mean that mine shouldn't be pushing against it.
And sometimes I've got a bulldozer, and and you're exactly right. The marketplace is not going to wait for our lines to fall down. And again, it doesn't mean that I've invaded your castle and, raided the storerooms. But what it does mean is that we've got to make a decision, because, does that mean that I'm going to start marketing up there, marketing my services? Because if they can choose what board they belong to, who's to stop me from saying, well, I think my board's doing what it needs to do? And so, but again, I don't think that.
But that's seen as hostile.
Exactly. I don't think that's the route we need to take, or that we should take at all, because if we'll just have the conversation, at the end of the day, if the members say, we really don't want to do it, it's just not right for our market, then fine, whatever, so be it. But to not even sit down and talk, I think is short-sighted, and I think it's going to continue to perpetuate the misunderstanding that members have about, well, why does my board not do this and your board does? And really and truly, it's just going to end up hurting us as an AE industry, because they're going to point the finger back at the AE and say, you're not doing your job well enough. We need to go find somebody else, instead of saying, well, how can we empower them to work collaboratively with a larger board to their south or to their north, whatever, and get what we need done, while at the same time overseeing the operations of the board. I don't want to run their books. I don't want to do any of that. If they want to keep their core services going, keep your core services going. But if I can apply consulting in government affairs, consulting in education, helping you plan education events, why would you not build that into your budget for someone else to provide that as a vendor? But anyway.
I think where you were mentioning, it goes beyond just the shared services, because I think that's a fallacy. It's a Band-Aid. It has to be an organizational commitment. It has to be a structural commitment for it ultimately long-term work out. I know there have been instances where some shared services work, but to me, the strength would be in true alliances, mutual and traded out memberships, where if you join one, essentially you're getting membership to 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And those could be not necessarily, it doesn't even have to be an alliance of neighboring boards. It could be an alliance of similar philosophies and similar styles. And so that we could begin to grow the marketplace through our association before we're being dictated to, that the actual marketplace is shifted in front of us. I think we're slow to that.
Well, Clint, we've never done it that way.
That's a true story. We probably made enough people mad on this topic. Let's move on a little bit.
I know. I'm kind of worried about the fallout from this. I'm just going to hope nobody listens to me this long.
Yeah, well, you may be okay there. I know one thing that's another passion of yours is this concept of leadership. And though you're younger into the industry, it's still something that you take on as a burden as an association executive, to be a leader for your leaders and a leader within the industry. I would want you to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. So, obviously I have to give a shout out to the people that I have around me, because, and you're included in that group, my friend. It's surrounding yourself with people who are better than you and who push you to innovate and do things. I mean, if Ryan Conrad knew how many times I look at his website and his Facebook page to see what he's doing, but Ryan's a great leader, and I put Kip in that group, Chip Allsweet, there's a bunch of guys and gals, I don't want to just say just guys, but that do really good work, that push me to try and showcase what I'm doing. But I think it comes down to one simple thing for me. If you were to ask me what my leadership strategy is that the more that I can push from the back instead of standing out front, the better I feel my return in life. My ROI will be better, because if I build people in front of me that are smart, that are capable, that are dedicated and passionate, they're going to support me down the line. You know, my best testament of leadership it would have to be Cliff. You know, because when I was down in Birmingham with Cliff never hesitated to push me out in the front. And, you know, if it meant presenting to the board, if it meant presenting at NAR, going to NAR, traveling stuff, Cliff facilitated that. And it created this kind of mentality, you know, that I would have when I got to the seat. Of absolutely building people around you. You know, one of the things like this year, I want as many people on my staff to get the RCE designation, because I want not only our members, but just the staff to know that they're capable to lead at any moment. You know, if something should ever happen to me, God forbid, knocking on wood, you know, anybody is qualified here to step up as an RCE designee, to step up and lead this association, or to go somewhere else and make a move and lead in somewhere else. But you know, leadership isn't about being popular. It's not about being seen. You know, which sometimes I think clouds our vision, because, you know, what we do every day what do you do at conferences? You know, you want to shake as many hands as you can. You want to have drinks with people. You want to go to dinner with people. And I think we kind of fall victim to the, oh, well, yeah, I get to hang out with that person mentality. And instead, I really, you know, what I try to push for is meaningful interactions. You know, I don't judge my success at a conference by how many handshakes I had. I judge my success at a conference from how many meaningful conversations that I sit down with. It's kind of like when you and I were in Atlanta. And, you know, yeah, it was nice to be down there. There was a lot of very important people, much more important than I am, down there. But when I look at that Atlanta time when you and I were down there, but, you know, the most meaningful part of that trip for me was sitting with you and talking about what was going on in your life and what you were working on. That was a success for me, because, you know, if we pour into each other more than I think we pull out of each other, I think we'll just have a better quote unquote society in which to live in, instead of somehow seeking just this superficial approval of everybody. But again, now I'm just rambling at this point. but you know, but that's what being a leader to me is, and that's the example I try to set on Facebook and on Twitter, whatever, is the celebration of people around me. But yeah.
But establishing yourself as that leader, as someone who's newer and younger in the industry, and especially when you're working with more seasoned leadership, in particular in your association, what's your approach with that? Like, you know, there's some amount of, they want to see demonstrated leadership, but there's also, you know, it's not just a historic demonstration. It's about how you conduct yourself and the ways in which you approach it. And you seem like someone who's really empowered by words and leadership from a vocal perspective.
Yeah, arguably, when they introduced me as the CEO here in Dayton, I'm sure there were people sitting around the room like, you know, has this guy ever even shaved before? You know, like, I mean, you know, they were looking at me as a young guy. You know, I was 29 years old, and they were probably wondering, you know, is this the best face for what we're doing? And I don't fault them in that. I mean, they don't know anything about me at that point. But you're exactly right. It's almost more expectation, I think, the younger you are, to somehow come in and show this attitude of professionalism, which, you know, I'm a fun-loving guy. I like to have a good time. I like to joke around, of course. But at the same time, it's like you have to learn when to turn it on, when to turn it off. And when you're speaking to a group of 100 people at a company meeting, it can't be the same happy-go-lucky attitude as, you know, you're just sitting around with your executive committee, you know, shooting the breeze. And so I think I've struck a really nice balance. And arguably, you know, I've had the feedback from people of that professionalism. But at at the same time, Clint, it's funny, one of the things that I've kind of worked on, or I've kind of forced myself to work on, is my facial expressions. Because I'm definitely somebody who, like, if I'm upset, like, you can absolutely tell that I'm upset. I have a terrible poker face, but I've had to adjust that. Because nonverbal communication for a CEO is equally as important as verbal communication for a CEO. And if you're sitting around the boardroom and, you've got that one member who just always wants to argue about something, and you've got this look on your face of, I'm going to take this binder and, hurl it across the room, it's, people look to that. They look to you for clues. And not only that, but your staff looks at you for clues. And, one of the things that I told my staff this year when we had our first staff meeting was that this is going to be a year of positive, that we're not going to sit around and be frustrated about things. We're going to keep positive attitudes, positive mindsets, and dealing with problems and issues head on with a positive attitude. Because it's so easy when just like the chips start stacking up that you just want to topple the whole mountain and say, I'm out, I'm not coming back, have fun replacing me, whatever, and that's not the right mentality to have either. But your question about the verbal communication. No, I think that is one of my strong suits. It's it made me want to be a writer. It was what it makes me a good writer, is the ability to kind of formulate these ideas and thoughts and kind of get them out there in a way that, some people are just kind of like, hey, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah. You fill in the gaps.
Yeah, exactly.
As a good Southern kid, I know you're into your sports, and the Auburn folks it didn't turn out quite so well for you this year, but there's always next year, War Eagles. But in terms of,
hey, I think that's actually the Auburn motto, is there's always next year. Like it's kind of our token phrase, I think.
What do you take away from watching sports? And Kip and I talked a little bit about Nick Saban, and I read some of your comments on Facebook, and you look at what's going on with the Patriots, something else Kip and I talked about. What lessons can you take from sports to apply as a CEO of an organization?
Well, that's a fantastic question, and I love to answer it. You bring up Nick Saban. Now, obviously, he is the general of the Dark Army, as I refer to them.
I was going to say, this is why I'm interested to hear.
But if you take Nick Saban out of the crimson sports jacket and off of the Bryant-Denny Stadium field, at the end of the day, Nick Saban is probably, in my opinion, strictly my opinion, so nobody quote me on this, but probably one of the best sports CEOs I can think of. And the reason I say that is because he adopts the same mentality that I think I'm trying to model, and that is building people around you. Because if you look right now in college football, there are head coaches at major universities that all coached under Nick Saban. You've got Jeremy Pruitt now at the University of Tennessee. You've got Kirby Smart at the University of Georgia. You've got multiple coaches who are now head coaches who learned their craft from Nick Saban, and he's done the same thing with the boys that he coaches. He's turned these young men into great professional athletes, but even those who haven't made it to the NFL, you've got them prepared to lead business companies. You've got them prepared to lead in whatever field they go into after college. Not everybody goes to the NFL. In fact, I have a friend whose cousin played for Nick Saban, and he's in business now. But I guarantee you that every time he sees that national championship ring or two on his dresser at home, he remembers the lessons that he was taught. And that's because Nick Saban, while he is a fantastic coach and does everything that he can to obviously build a dynasty, he helps other people build a dynasty too. And whether or not he openly admits to that, this is, again, one man's opinion and an outsider looking in. But I don't think, and obviously being from the South, NFL football isn't as big of a deal for me. It's either Alabama or Auburn. And we don't really get into pro football down in Alabama very much. But again, I just think that if you look at Nick Saban, his mentality of building other leaders around him is just, it's fantastic. And it's a mentality, and that's what I've said on Facebook, is that his ability to build people around him makes him who he is, because he puts his system into their minds. He creates the next generation of coach that's going to coach at a level of excellence that he's prescribed.
Yeah, I truly appreciate that. I'm a big organizational culture guy. Systems,
that's it. Culture
processes, all that is a huge thing, and there's something to be learned whenever you're in a leadership role, regardless of what you're in charge of. There's something to be learned from others who excel at it, and I do enjoy popping in and looking on how they do it. But this, in terms of their success, sometimes it's frustrating because you would like to see someone else in there as just a general sports fan. So before I let you go, I know this is a stressful job that we're involved in, and we do lots of different things, but it looks to me, at least from the outside world, that you're the one example of a guy who actually takes solace in shoe shopping. What's the deal with the shoe shopping?
Well, that's,
you have a closet full of just all sorts of shoes?
Well, okay. My wife set the bar really high. When we moved from Birmingham to Dayton, my wife had 100 pairs of shoes. Now, these were pre-marriage. These were pre-me being in her life. So, I can't claim that, I've allowed this type of shenanigan to go on, although I really don't have much of a say in anything anyway. I just kind of live there from day to day. But, if you really want to think, my solace really probably, and what I'm kind of known for is probably my cooking.
Yeah.
I love to cook. The problem is that I love to eat too much, and I need to strike a better balance with how much I cook and how much I eat. So, but I think the answer to your question is, it's so important. I was with a group the other day. I'm part of this kind of men's Bible study group here in Dayton, and we were talking about hobbies and how important it is. This is a group of men who are vice presidents, CEOs around the community. They get together and kind of talk once a month. And, we were talking about distractions, and we were talking about good distractions from business life. And, how a lot of times in life you can only care about two things. There's usually three areas that are most important in your life. There's your family, there's your job and your career, and there's your health. And usually two of those things get the most attention from you. And for me personally, obviously I have a fantastic marriage. I love my wife dearly, and we're great in that regard. And secondly, I've invested a lot of time and energy into my career. Which clearly, being where I am by age 31, you can't do if you're just kind of hee-hawing around. But the third area is health. And so my resolution this year is to take away, not from my marriage and doing well in my marriage area,
good call.
But to take just an ounce of the quote obsessional behavior, because that's what these things are. They're obsessional behaviors, and I don't mean obsession in a bad word. What I mean is obsession is a focus. I focus every day on work. My whole life, weekends. I was at a home builders event on Saturday. At least 7 to 6 days a week are focused around what I'm doing for work. If I took an ounce of that and applied that same obsessional focus, and remember we're talking about dedication, and same dedication over to health, what would happen? And so that's kind of my goal, is to be looking good and feeling good. So that way, when you see me in DC, you're like, wait, who is that young go-hard? And he's got great shoes. He's got good looking shoes, and he's lost a bunch of weight. So but it's finding those distractions, man. It's getting away from work. And there's so many AEs out there that I think struggle with that, because I can't be the only person that works too hard. And we've got to get better mental health. We've got to get better mental health in our industry. And, maybe one of these days I'll do an AEI talk or something, or maybe we could do a whole show on mental health and talk about that.
I mean,
it is.
the whole thing around the association is those who get into it, even the volunteers, find a love for it, a passion for it. And so it's easy to spend two of your focuses up on family and then work, and leave some of that work-life balance out of it, where you take care of yourself both physically and mentally, just because it is an obsessive thing, but it's also so enjoyable.
Well, we just don't talk about that enough in our society. We're so focused on stress, on work and the grind, that we don't take time to talk about our mental health. And, if you're sitting at your house on a Sunday afternoon dreading Monday, you're doing something wrong. You should be blessed to be able to go to work. You should be blessed to be able to get up and go do these things. But there's something that's keeping you from making that connection. And that's what we need to focus on. And, I've thought about doing some writing around that, and really being some open and honest dialogue about it. We had a rebar camp, and I know your time here is running up, but I'll just say this. We had a rebar camp here, and I led a session on leadership for this rebar camp here in Dayton. And I didn't even talk about leadership one time. I talked about my own struggle with feeling happy and content. Now, this is my members sitting around talking with the CEO of the organization, talking about feeling stressed and feeling unaccomplished in places. And that was and we left, the whole sessions had changed, and yet me and these 10 people are still sitting up here having this absolutely in-depth and meaningful, real conversation about feeling inadequate and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, it was so powerful and so real, but we just don't do that enough. So again, there's a show idea for you one day. And if I haven't talked too much, maybe you'll invite me back.
I'd love to have you back, and good conversations. Yeah, it's amazing how quickly an hour can fly by when you're engaged and enjoying the conversation. So, Andrew, thank you for your time. I truly appreciate it, and I appreciate your patience with my technology challenges this morning.
Oh, it's all good. As soon as you said you were updating your computer, I decided to update mine, and I was like, if I miss this time, Clint's going to kill me. So luckily we didn't miss it, man. And I was looking forward to it all last week. So it's an honor to be on your show, and I'm just proud of what you're doing, man. You're doing great stuff.
Thanks, man. You've always been great for me, and I look forward to what we'll do moving forward.
All right, my dude. Well, look forward to hearing the show when it comes out.
Great. Yeah, I can't wait to see those shoes.
If I could get my leg up here, I would show you the new ones I'm wearing today. But you can look on my Instagram.
If you get to a point where you have to bring another bag for your shoes to conferences, that's when you might want to start to question.
Nah, dude. Listen, when you're a big guy and you don't have a whole lot of clothes you can wear sometimes, you got to go with accessories, bro. You got to get the new Apple Watch, man. You got to get accessories to look good, my man. So it's shoes and accessories for me.
All right, man. On that note, we'll talk to you later.
All right, buddy. See ya.
Take care.